They said, "Just sign, Mom." They smiled like it was a favor. It was the moment everything changed. My name is Margaret. I raised 3 children with hands that never stopped moving. Mending, cooking, holding. Those hands remember every scraped knee, every prom dress, every late-night homework plea. Now they shake sometimes. People call it age. I call it time. The afternoon they came into my bedroom felt ordinary until it wasn't. Sunlight lay across the bed like a promise. My eldest, Daniel, was laughing. Listing rooms like he was auctioning off memories. Master will be mine. Mom, your jewelry, the car, everything. His wife, Claire, clucked like a satisfied animal. They set a stack of papers on my lap like a meal they expected me to eat. Mom, it's simple. 1 signature. That's it, Daniel said. It was not a question. The smiles were too bright, the voices too practiced. They closed the door behind them, and the house narrowed into the space between us. Claire put the pen in my fingers with a firmness that said, "No debate." She touched my hand as if steadying a vase. I could see the way Daniel's eyes flicked to the pages, already counting, already dividing. The room hummed with the soft domestic sounds of a life I had built, now reduced to paperwork. I signed. The motion was small. My hand shook. The pen scraped. Their laughter softened into relieved whispers. They hugged each other like people who have won a prize. I watched them leave carrying folded sheets and a new light in their faces. I sat very still and listened to the house settle. The ink on the paper was almost dry. My throat had a taste like metal. Not fear exactly, but a cold settling. I did not cry. I would not give them that satisfaction. When the house slept, I went to the drawer where I kept things from before. Old receipts, a yellowed photograph, a slim folder with a single word written on it in my husband's handwriting. Authority. I did not touch it yet. I only prepared. Tonight I would pretend to be small and thankful. Tonight I would let them dream. But beneath the quiet I felt a steady, attentive thought, one that had watched a lifetime of taking and knew how to wait. The real voice was not yet speaking. It would speak at the right time. I didn't cry that night. After they left with the papers, the house felt heavier than the walls could bear. The silence was no longer peace. It was judgment. Their laughter still echoed in my ears. The way they mocked each other about who'd get the bigger share. They thought the world was made of signatures and seals. They never understood what I had built with breath and bone. For days I stayed quiet. Too quiet. Margaret, the housekeeper, kept asking if I was all right. I told her I was fine. But my eyes were always fixed on the window, not looking out, but looking back. I replayed every moment they'd stood there. Impatient, their pens trembling with greed. And I remembered something my late husband once said. Power doesn't live in the ink, my love. It lives in who holds the pen. That night, I called my lawyer. I didn't tell the children. I didn't tell anyone. Only Mr. Hargrove, old, loyal, discreet. I told him to visit at dawn and to bring the same papers again. He hesitated, then whispered, "Are you sure, Mrs. Ellison?" I smiled. Yes, but this time the ink will tell the truth. For the next few weeks, I played the part of the fragile mother. I let them believe I was slipping, in health, in memory, in spirit. They called less. They visited only to measure what furniture would fit in their new homes. They thought I didn't notice. The way they spoke in hushed tones about the transfer, or how my youngest rolled his eyes when I asked about his children. But I noticed everything. Every glance, every whisper, every seed of arrogance they had planted. So I began preparing my departure. Not death, not yet, but an exit no one would expect. I called a friend at St. Mary's, a private nursing home far away. I told her I needed a room just for a while, somewhere I could think, somewhere I could vanish. Before I left, I sat in my study, turned on the recorder, and began to speak. My voice shook at first, then steadied. I poured everything into that little black box. My memories, my warnings, my final gift. "If you are listening," I said softly, "then I am gone, or perhaps I am freer than ever." When I finished, I sealed the recorder in an envelope with the words, "To be played during the reading of the will." Then I stood by the window one last time, watching the sun rise through the old oak trees. My body felt weak, but my spirit, it was blazing. They thought they had taken everything. They didn't know. I had already begun taking it back. The first snow of winter fell that morning, silent, soft, almost kind. It covered everything like forgiveness does, gently, without asking. I watched it from the narrow window of my room at St. Mary's. No one knew I was there, not even my children. For them, I had vanished. I left my house unlocked, my coat still hanging by the door, my medicine bottles untouched on the table. Margaret, dear soul, followed my instructions carefully. She called them the next day crying, saying I hadn't come home after my morning walk. They searched the woods, the lake, even called the police. My eldest son, Jonathan, gave an interview, eyes red, voice trembling. He was convincing. He said Mother wasn't well. She must have lost her way. But I saw the footage later, on the small television in the nursing home lounge. His tears didn't reach his eyes. The house soon became a shrine of pretense. They wore grief like expensive clothing, stiff and spotless. They organized a memorial, not because they missed me, but because society expected it. Meanwhile, I stayed hidden. Each night I wrote in my journal, my true will, not of property or estate, but of memory. I wrote about their childhoods, their laughter, their innocence before greed had taken root. And as I wrote, I planned every second of the day that would come, the day my voice would finally speak again. Mr. Hargrove visited me quietly once a week. He brought documents, updates, and a kind smile. One evening he said, "They're pushing for the will reading next month. They think you're gone for good." I nodded. Good, let them finish building their illusion. I want it tall enough to fall hard. Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, I recorded a second message, shorter, colder. My voice was slower this time, deliberate. Every word was chosen to cut like truth does when it arrives too late. "You took my hands," I said into the microphone, "and used them to write your greed. But you forgot. I still had my voice, and my voice signs louder than any pen." I gave the tape to Hargrove, sealed, marked with gold ink. He hesitated before taking it. "You're sure, ma'am?" "Once this plays, there's no turning back." I looked him straight in the eye. "That's the point, Mr. Hargrove. Some doors should never be reopened." When he left, I turned off the lights, letting the room dissolve into shadows. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. The world believed I was dead, and for the first time, I felt alive. The grand hall smelled of old wood and expensive perfume, the scent of pretended grief. A long mahogany table stretched across the room, and at its head sat Mr. Hargrove, calm as ever, a sealed envelope in front of him. My children sat on either side, dressed in dark suits, somber expressions carefully painted on their faces. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, confident. Clara checked her phone under the table. Michael poured himself another drink, whispering to his wife, "Finally, this nightmare's over." Hargrove cleared his throat. "As executor of Mrs. Ellison's estate, I'll begin the reading of her will." He started with the formalities, the dates, the property numbers, the expected legal phrases that made my life sound like a list of assets. The children exchanged proud glances. Every line seemed to promise them more. Then Hargrove paused. He reached for a small black recorder, placed it on the table, and said quietly, "Before the will continues, Mrs. Ellison left behind a message. She requested it be played, now." Jonathan frowned. "A message?" Clara scoffed. "Probably some sentimental goodbye." Then click. The room filled with my voice. "My dear children," it began softly, almost a whisper. "If you are hearing this, it means you believe I'm gone. Perhaps that brings you comfort or perhaps relief. But I am still with you, in ways you will not like." Their smiles faded. "You forced my hands to sign your desires. You told me I was old, confused, unfit to decide what I built. You took my name and stamped it beneath your greed. But while you took my signature, you never earned my blessing." The silence grew heavy. Jonathan's hand twitched. Clara looked pale. "So, before I left, I made one last change. A gift from mother to memory. Everything you thought was yours, the estate, the business, the accounts, has been transferred to those who knew love without condition. The caretaker who held my hand when I fell. The orphanage your father once supported. The people who remembered me, not my money." Michael slammed his glass. "That's impossible." Hargrove didn't even flinch. "It's legal. Mr. Ellison, she was of sound mind and will when she made the change." Then the recording continued. One final line, calm but searing. "You wanted my silence. Instead, you'll live with my voice." The tape clicked off. The room was frozen. And then a sound. Footsteps, slow, steady, coming from the doorway. Jonathan turned first, his face drained of color. There I stood, frail but alive, wrapped in my gray coat. the winter sun behind me like a halo. No one spoke. I looked at them, not with anger, but with something colder. Disappointment carved deep and final. I came, I said quietly, not to take anything back, but to see what you'd do when you realized you'd lost everything that mattered. Clara began to cry. Jonathan lowered his head. Michael muttered something under his breath that sounded like a prayer. I turned to Hargrove and nodded. We're done here. Then I walked out into the snow. The sound of my footsteps, the only proof I was ever real. Behind me, the world I built was falling apart, just as they had planned for me. The difference was, I planned it better.